might be quite new for a lot of people who've not heard about different aspects of SEO. So let me hand it over to you. I've just started recording the session, and I will share it with you with each one of you at the end of the session. So that's it. Miranda, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you all for joining and for your interest in the topic. So I'm very pleased to be here. So today we'll talk about websites migrations, and I will share my screen. I think you're now all able to see it, right?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So yeah, short introduction about which the brands I worked for, and I was already introduced, but yeah, since 2008, working in digital marketing and specifically on SEO. So today we'll mainly talk what is a migration, and the process that we follow, how we can minimize risk, how we can minimize the loss, and then also the migration checklist. So first of all, about migration, basically there's autoplay. There's a different, it involves different elements. I'm just, if I can just share it again. 1 second. I have the wrong one presentation. In the meantime, has any of you already worked on site migrations? Okay, for so far it's new. So usually from an SEO perspective, it can be a bit tricky because it usually combines with traffic loss. That's why it's a very sensitive topic in SEO. And I will share my screen. So usually when any site is going into migration, the SEO persons become a bit concerned. And basically, site migration means any like large undertaking what is being done on the website. And so, yeah, any substantial changes, which could be either to where the website is hosted, the type of platform that we're using, content, design. So it involves different, it could be different reasons. And usually it's because, for example, there's a change of hosting party or for a platform. So if you have one website which is currently existing on WordPress, but you want to, for example, move to Drupal or the other way around, that is like one reason for a site migration. The other could be that maybe you have multiple sites and you want to merge them into one site, one stronger site, which is, we see that quite a lot happening from SEO. Because if, for example, one company has multiple websites, with every website, you need to do your SEO, you need to do your marketing, your paid ads. So that's why a lot of these days, a lot of companies are consolidating their websites into one to make sure they have one strong website and all the marketing efforts goes to that one single site. But it involves a couple of migrations to get there. Could be that maybe there's like a design update to the website to make it more fresh or at least look new again, or rebranding. So that is just a couple of reasons why you could do a site migration. So the process is usually largely five steps. So first we have the planning, like what is exactly included into the site migration, what kind of websites, what elements of the site, and then we also list the requirements, and from SEO, but also from other teams, as analytics or product, to make sure that the new website it's meeting all the requirements from the different teams. And based on that input, we then created a project plan. I will go into each step a bit more detailed, but the next phase would be the preparation. So basically the building of the site, of the new website, making sure that all the pages are migrated. And then comes the most important part for SEO. So really testing the website. Has everything migrated? Is everything looking good from a search engine perspective? And at the launch day, we have specific activities that we need to do. And then as soon as the site is launched, especially in the first 6 weeks, it's a very important period to monitor the site very closely and to monitor the performance very closely. So with the first phase, we want to make sure that everything is in scope. So when you're migrating websites, are, for example, subdomains, are they included, yes or no? Which platform are we going to use? Which team is going to work on it? What is the time frame that we're going to launch it in? So these are all very important questions to be able to create a planning or like a project plan. What we usually recommend from site migration is that we isolate changes. And what we mean with that is that when we do the migrations, we try to keep the content and all other elements the same. So we want to migrate all the pages. We want to migrate the content in the exact same state, and also have, for example, meta titles, meta descriptions, heading ones, to keep them all the same. If you looked into any website, or for example here, one plugin which I like to use is, for example, the SEO meta in one click. And then you can very quickly see from any page, like what is the meta title, what is the description, and how does the headers look like. And we try to keep it all the same on the new site as well. The reason why we do that is that we then can really analyze like any change in performance. Is it related to the site migration? And then we also can see where do we then need to change in case there's any like issue occurring. Sometimes what teams want is that at the same time, when they want to have a new website, they also want to have new content or add more images. And usually when a lot of images are being added, the content is being shortened. And that also that can have a negative impact on the traffic. So that's why we recommend first to do the site migration in the current state, and then maybe 3 or 4, 5 months later, then start with the content improvements. So you really are able to see what is then the impact of the site migration. When we are in the planning, it's also important to determine the KPIs. So when is actually the migration successful, and also to set expectations. On the migrations which I worked on for the last years, we usually see in the first 3 months that it's some migrations were like quite of the same from traffic, but for some websites we saw like 10-15% decline. And especially if not everything was migrated, then we see larger declines, like up to 50% of the traffic. So it's very important to also set these expectations and communicate them, so people are aware of the risks, but they also, if any decline happens, that they know, okay, it's part of the process. But then we also use that as input to then optimize the website. See where Google is, for example, struggling, and to make sure that the traffic goes up again. If there are any questions in the meantime, also please feel free to drop them in the chat, and then we can discuss them after. In terms of preparation, it's very important to have a full scope of the website. So one of the most common reasons why migrations are losing in traffic is that not all the pages are being migrated. And sometimes we get from content teams saying like, but these pages are old, they're not important anymore. But if these pages still have traffic, then it means that if they're not migrated, you will lose this traffic. So that's why it's important to first make sure you have a complete scope of all the URLs that are on the website. And I'm using a couple of sources for that. One is Google Search Console, and Google Search Console is a tool provided by Google. It's free, so anyone can create an account in it. The only thing where you will run into is that if you're working on a website and you want to export all the URLs, it will only give you 1,000 pages. So this is a smaller site, but maybe if I change it. So Google Search Console has the data for the last 16 months. So when we do the site migrations, I export all the URLs, which are then for the last 16 months, just to make sure that I have a large possible data set. Because it could be that certain activities are seasonal. So for if you have, for example, a campaign around Christmas or Black Friday, those pages are not a lot visited in the rest of the year. So if you only do for 3 months, it might be that you miss certain pages. So when we do 60 months, then if I would export this, I would only get 1000 URLs. But I know there are more URLs on this website. So one thing how we can extract all the URLs is to connect it with Google Data Studio. It's also a free tool from Google where you can integrate multiple sources. And when you integrate Google Search Console into Google Data Studio, you're actually able to get more URLs from it. So if I then I just go back to make sure I can select any date, but I only get the data for the last 16 months. And then I get then all the URLs. And from here, I can then export it and then to an Excel document. And now I should have more than 1000 URLs. Yeah, so this is a smaller website, but especially with enterprise sites, it's very handy because then 1000 URLs, it's not enough. It could be that because it's over a period of a long time period, it could be that certain pages are not live anymore. So to check if these pages are still live, I'm using a site crawler, which is called Screaming Frog. Also, it's you can download it for free and use it up to 500 URLs. Above that, it's a license, but it's a not expensive tool. And then you can just select the URLs, and it then starts crawling to see which pages are still active and which ones are not existing anymore. So here you can see from these pages, like 200 means they're still active, but the 301 means that they're redirected. So then either I can add the redirected URL to my list, at least to have like the full scope. After when we share also the presentation with you, I added a link into it to a blog how you can connect Google Search Console into Google Data Studio. So that's one source, and also for me it's the most important source because it gives a list of URLs of the pages which are indexed by Google. So if we use certain pages for paid search, we can change the URL when we update campaigns. But specifically, I want to know which URLs are being indexed by Google, so which one I need to redirect or at least migrate to make sure that all the pages are going to a new page. Another important source is Google Analytics and also backlinking tools. And one which I often use is Majestic. It's especially, I will just use the same website as an example. So especially URLs which got backlinks, we want to make sure that they are accessible because they got more or they got SEO value. So we can then see what are then the pages that got backlinks, and we can also export these and merge them together in the same Excel sheet. So we know which pages definitely we need to like make sure that they're accessible or redirect to also distribute the link juice to important pages. And then One source is also to check with any colleagues who are working on paid advertising if there are any URLs or campaigns that they are running, and to make an export of the pages they use. Because if you have, for example, A/B testing, or you have certain campaign pages, often those teams are giving it a no index, because they're either like duplicate or just like a campaign page. So it's not like uh, necessarily one that needs to be indexed. So if we would only look into Google Search Console, we would miss these URLs. So that's why it's good to check with colleagues if they can make an export of all the URLs that are being used in paid advertising. One which I also it's good to note is one of the issues what we had is that colleagues were adding a link into an email, and they were sending that out to clients or to clients. So when they click on that email, it was going to it was going to a page, or for example, short URLs. They were being used in marketing campaigns. So in Philips, we had philips.com/Lumea, which is and then was redirecting to a page in that country. And it's then going to a different URL. So these short URL, you won't find them in Google Analytics because they don't have visits. Not in Google Search Console because they don't. The URL itself doesn't have traffic because Google Search Console will only report on the actual URL. So that's why it's also good to ask if there's any like marketing or short URLs being used, to make sure you add it as well to the list. And then the other one is XML sitemap. So almost every site has an XML sitemap, which tells to Google what are the pages on the site. Oh. And here you can see any of these pages. Also, if you want to get the list of those, you can use the same crawler. And instead of, this is the list which I'm using. So you have different modes or different, the list is that you can just fill in one URL, for example, the sitemap, and then it's downloading the URLs. So it looks now into this file, and then it shows me there are 822 URLs. So I can click OK, and then I get the full URLs as well, for example, with the meta title, meta description, so all the details. So this is a very important source as well. With the new website, it's important to make sure that the content can be, or that the website is built in an SEO friendly way. What's happening a lot these days is that websites are moving from one platform, for example, WordPress, to a JavaScript framework as React. And sometimes, especially with JavaScript frameworks, search engines as Google and Bing, they find it more difficult to analyze the content. That is one thing. So you need to make sure that the new platform is SEO friendly, and that also the content can be easily accessed by search engines, and to make sure that all the pages are being migrated that had traffic. So when we made an export of the Google Search Console, and what we also see here, we also got the traffic data. And this is very handy to show what are then the pages in import, or like the most important pages. So it also helps with reviewing the site. Like, are the most important pages, are they redirected? From an SEO point of view, we recommend that even also the pages with smaller traffic, to redirect them as well, because even you would say, okay, maybe it's not that important, like 30 visits, but if you the number is not that high yet, but if you sum it up, usually with enterprise sites, it's still like a large quantity of traffic. So that's why it's also good to migrate the smaller pages. The ones where there would be doubts is the one with the zero traffic pages. So it would be good to check are these pages still important, or can we, for example, merge them or delete them because they didn't generate any organic traffic. One thing, if you're migrating a website, the pages which are being linked from the navigation, they are being seen as important. So if you change certain links in navigation, or for example, you go from navigation with header drop down, but now only links, then Google doesn't see those links anymore to those other pages, and that usually generates a traffic loss for those pages which are not being linked anymore. So if you migrate a website, it's good to check, like especially also from the homepage, are all the pages in navigation, are they still there? And also, like any links that are on the page, are they also listed into the new website? Same applies for the footer. So the internal links, it has an important impact on the traffic after go live of the new site. So that's why we have as a guideline that don't shorten content, because that's like a guarantee recipe for traffic loss. But also keep your internal links or improve them. So Google is we make it very easy for Google and other search engines to see all the pages on the website. Then when you come to the testing phase, most important phase for SEO during the migration, because what we're trying to do is that before the site goes live, that we filtered out anything that could cause a traffic decline. So we noticed that with Google, any small change can already cause a traffic decline, and that could be there are like certain markups on the page. And what we mean with markups is a schema markup. Let me see if it's on this website. This one. I'll go back to give you this example. Or let me try another website. So with schema.org, you're able to tell to Google what the page is about. So especially since Google does a lot with machine learning, this schema helps a lot to identify what kind of page it is. So here we say that this page, it's a job posting, and it also gives the details for that job posting. If with a migration, if you move this script down, it can already be a reason for traffic decline. So although the content is there, the location of the content also impacts the traffic. And it could also be with other schema markups. If you, for example, have a recipe site, just to make sure that all the markups are still there. That's a one requirement, but then also that they're still high in the code. And important, like the meta titles, meta descriptions, if there's any like broken links. You'll find a lot if you crawl the new website. So what I showed you now like was the list view. If you do the spider, then you can just give any URL. So if you have the URL of the development site, you can start the crawl, and then the tool will also show you if there's any broken links on the website. So you can just run it for a while. I'll just wait until I get a couple of them. Okay, I'll do it in the meantime. Then, so that's one thing, the site crawler, but it's also good to look into the code itself. So for example, with this extension, like the headers, the meta title, meta description, headers, image alt text, it's a smaller ranking factor, but if you have a very visual site or web shop, it could still be important. Let me see if we find a couple. Another thing is that, so one thing is we want to resolve any broken links. So if they were any on this website, you would find them here. Another is like internal redirects, because if you have an internal redirect, so that means there's a link to one page on the website, and if you click on it, it redirects to another page. That is causing extra delay because, especially on mobile, so because then the browser goes to that one URL, sees like, hey, it's redirected, goes to the next one. So that is things that we also want to resolve. So with this crawler, you can then click on a URL, and if you then click on in links, you can then see, so for this URL is being redirected, and it's going to the URL, or it's now a different URL. And you will see that actually this link is present on a lot of pages. If this is happening, so if you see this on a lot of pages, it's usually because it's included into the navigation or the footer. So I would click then on inspect, and I would search, and then I see, I'll just do the, oh, I pasted the wrong one. So I want to see that part. Yeah. So here, you see on the bottom of my browser, it's the link, which we saw in the crawler, and it's in the footer. That's why you'll find it here on so many pages, because the footer is on all the pages. If we search for another one, like here, there's one URL, and it's redirecting to what is it instead of just the name. And then we can see that it's listed on this page. So on this page, it's currently a link to the URL which is being redirected. So then we can go to that page, click on that part, copy the URL, search in it, and then you actually need to delete the first part, because often what you see here, it's a bit small in my screen. Let me see if I can make it larger. So internal links are often being placed with just a slash. So if I would copy the whole URL, which you see here, I wouldn't find, or I wouldn't see where the link is. So that's why I deleted the first part. And then I see that this is the link, which is then being redirected. And then I can verify it as well. I click on it. And then I have a Chrome extension, which is redirect path. And then I can also see, okay, this is the URL. So then I know which link to update, and to make sure that also the internal links are solved. In terms of priority, the broken links are the most important ones, because then somebody's ending on an error page, which we want to avoid. If we have enough time for during the migration, then we can pick up the internal redirects. Yeah, somebody's ringing my door. One thing as what you already what you saw now is that it's very in the minor details. So when you do site migration, it's important to review almost every site because even if you, for example, on this page, if the meta title is different, it can already cause a traffic decline. If the content is not migrated or just being shorted, it causes a traffic decline. Same if it's like a different platform, if the loading time is slower than the old site. So it's all like little things that can have some serious impact. So with the testing, we look into the different angles from the website. So one is like the technical. So for example, the site crawler, or we actually look into the code as well. So when we show like the placement of the job posting markup, what we show for one website. 1 second. Sorry. Uh, 10 seconds. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Okay. So important to look from the technical, but also then the content. Is the meta titles, meta description the same? Does the content look the same? And also in terms of internal links. So it's good to look especially from these three angles. And then, of course, also to the performance. Page speed is also an important one. What we're trying to do with the site migration is to usually keep the same URLs and not to change any URLs. But if URL change, then we need to make sure that we have one-on-one redirects. And what we mean with one-on-one redirects is that if you would migrate this page, that this page goes exactly to the same URL or to the same page on the new website. So the reason why we do that, if we would have this content page and we would just say, we just redirect it to /blogs and then Google will find it out itself. It's a guarantee that you lose traffic because Google then sees like, hey, but before I had all this content and then I'm being redirected to just like an overview page, which doesn't answer the same user question anymore. So that's why we prefer to keep all the URLs the same, because so we don't need redirects. But if any URL changes, then we need to have redirects. Important here that a different redirect could be even with slash, without slash. It's being considered as a different URL. Same as if you're, for example, HTML or without. So we try to stay in the to keep the same URL and otherwise redirects. The reason why we want to avoid redirects is that even if we do like a one-on-one redirect, we notice there's some drop in traffic. It's not a lot, like Google says something between 5 to 15%, but still, if you have a website and you have your traffic, you want to avoid any traffic loss. So that's why we try to keep the URLs the same as much as possible. Then on launch day is, so what we usually do with testing sites is that we say that Google is not allowed to crawl the website. And we do that via a file, which is called robots.txt. And the robots.txt is present on any website. So you can just go to any website at robots.txt in it. And the purpose of this document is that if Google comes to a website, it first visits this file to see what kind of folders is the crawler allowed to enter and which ones not. So with a disallow, you can then say, or hear TripAdvisor is then saying, I don't want the crawler to go to this folder. Same for the other ones. So with when we are developing a new website, we then actually have just only like disallow. So that means that none of the crawlers or Google or Bing is able to crawl the development site. When you go live, you want to make sure that it's being removed as quick as possible to make sure that Google is actually able to crawl your website. So that either you can remove the line completely or you can say that Google is able to allow. So if it's not being, if it's just being like allowed, let me just try if I find the example. That was. So if there's no like disallow with only like a slash, then Google knows like, okay, I can just crawl the whole website. Any question? Okay.
Actually,
Then,
there's one. Sorry, Miranda. There's one question
yeah.
from Sarah. She asks, "How does one improve SEO of a blogspot website?" She says, "I'd like to use Yoast and Monster, but I see it's mainly used on WordPress sites."
Yeah. I will get back to that question after
Sure.
at
Sounds
the
good.
end of the
Yeah.
call. Yeah. So first of all, so on launch day, so it's very important that we allow Google to crawl the website. So by removing the disallow, which is slash, from the robots.txt. Then also important to have the sitemap URL in it. So when Google comes first to this file, it then sees, okay, which folders am I allowed to crawl and which ones not. But if you then list the sitemap, it also knows what are then all the pages on the website. So it helps for indexation. So that's why we also need to add the sitemap to the robots.txt. And then implement also the redirects. So if any URL changes, that at least Google knows what is then the new URL for that same page. And very important we made an export of all the pages from the website to crawl them, to make sure that all the URLs are going to a new working page, and to also crawl the website itself to identify, like, is there any like broken links or any issues that we need to fix. One thing what we see a lot with migrations is that there are links to the development domains. So sometimes when content editors, when they're working on the site, and then they copy a URL from the development site into, for example, a button, and that is something that should not happen, because we don't want that if we are on our new website, then if they click on something like contact us, that they then go to the development domain, which is not actively being maintained. So that's why it's good to check for any links to development sites. And then especially the first 6 weeks after the go live are very important. Usually we do every week like a technical audit to make sure, like, if there's any errors occurring. Do we see, for example, in Google Search Console any issues? So if we go to Google Search Console, and then we can say by coverage, and then what kind of errors are there. So in this case, for this website, there are 3 URLs which are in the sitemap, but they have no index. And one has, for example, a warning. It's indexed, but it's blocked to robots.txt. So under coverage in the Google Search Console, it's important to monitor to check, like, is Google running into any errors that we need to fix. And usually we try to make sure that we fix any issues before Google finds them. So especially the first and the second week, we do a lot of checks. Then third week, we usually see, or if there's any errors, we see that in Google Search Console, and we also see the impact on the traffic. So to monitor the traffic, we create SEO dashboards in Data Studio. Let me see. And then here I only created it for this for one overview, but you're able to create different tabs. So then it could be like, especially with enterprise sites, maybe one is for the overall traffic, the other one is, for example, for your product categories, another one product detail pages, like the individual product pages, blogs could be another one. So if there's any issue with the traffic, you can then see what is then is it then an overall issue, or is it, for example, related to certain categories? So that's why if you split your dashboard into different segments of your site, that helps to analyze and see if there's any issue where you then need to jump in to fix that. So traffic loss is usually the biggest concern with the migration. And this is one example. So you have a website which was growing over time in traffic. Then they did a migration, they dropped, and you see the impact. Like it's almost, or like especially here, it was a big. They had an issue. They probably fixed it, but the traffic is still below than what it was before. It's climbing up afterwards, but actually, you don't want to have this gap because you prefer to go directly from here and then going up. So that's why the migrations are very sensitive, and especially the testing phase, it's a very important one for SEO. So there are a couple of things to keep in mind to minimize the traffic loss. First of all the pages that generated traffic that need to be enabled on the new website. Also to make sure that keep all the HTML markups as meta title, description, or the content or headings to keep them the same. And then, although we try to keep the URLs the same as much as possible, if they change, then we need to use the one-on-one redirect. So always, like, if you have any blocks, redirect directly to this to the same block, but then on a new URL instead of just like going to an overview page. Important to check for any broken links and to solve them, preferably before going live. And what also helps, if you, for example, have a domain change. So you first had like one website which is called example.com, and now you go to myexample.com. Then if you have any websites linking to your old site, you can then reach out saying like, hey, we changed our website domain. This is our new website. Could you please update the link you have on your website? Because then that's also better for the SEO. And sometimes one which gets forgotten, but it's important, is to make sure that your analytics tag is correct, because then it could show that maybe you have a decline or something in analytics, and you think, okay, maybe what's going wrong? But then in Google Search Console, you do see the traffic. So if that happens, it could be an issue related to maybe the analytics tag is not there, or maybe the tagging is not the same as on your previous website. Then I have a large file here with the what elements to check for the if you migrate a site. But the important ones is to isolate changes. So only change, for example, the platform, but not the content at the same time. Make a backup of the old site to make sure that if there's any issues with putting the new site live, or you see that Google is not able to index the content on the new website, that you always have the ability to go back again. Again, migrate all the pages which are live or which had traffic, very important one, so that's why I keep repeating it. And keep URLs the same, and use the URL redirects. So in the presentation, it will be shared with you. There's a link to this file. And here you see per item, so for example, the site setup, and then what are then the recommended suggestions. So for example, clean URLs, don't use parameters. So I won't go through all this list, but at least you have it as a handout or like a tool. And then you can also, because one function was the question about Blogspot, you could also use this list to see if there's anything that you could already improve on your website as well. It's more from a technical perspective, but migration is usually technical SEO. Yeah, so it's quite a long list. So feel free to go through it at any time. And that was my presentation. Are there any questions? I saw one of the Blogspot. Yeah, so the question was, how do one improve SEO of a Blogspot website? I would like to use Yoast and Monster, but I see it's mainly used on WordPress sites. Yeah, so Yoast is a plugin for WordPress, so that's why you'll only see it there. Sometimes if you have certain platforms as a blogspot, it has limited opportunities. Limited technical opportunities to optimize. You're still able to do other elements of SEO. So SEO, you have three areas: the content, the technical area, and outreach or link building, like basically to how strong or how much authority does your website have. You can still work a lot on the content. So really try to do your keyword research. Where are people searching for, that you can answer, write in-depth content about it, and make sure that the page looks nice. Maybe add some videos as well. So that can also, even if you're a blogspot, it can still improve your traffic. And another question I want to ask: how to boost blog? Which tools we can use for this? Um, I would focus especially on the content, um, and of course, like making sure you have that Google is able, from a technical perspective, that you have a fast website and Google is able to index your content. But really trying to find out where their target group searching for and what can I offer them, what is better than competitors. So usually what I do is that I check which websites are there currently ranking in the top 5 and what can I do then on my website to provide a better experience, either like more in-depth content, certain tools that they don't offer, anything but to make sure that Google finds my result better than them.
Right, guys, if there are any other questions, please feel free to either unmute and ask or drop it in the chat. A quick question from my side, Miranda. So if there was a migration that was done, and if there was a lot of traffic loss, what would be your next step? What would be the next course of action if it hasn't been done well?
Yeah, so luckily with SEO, it's very data driven. So we can go back or we can see in the dashboards which pages did we lose traffic. And then if we also track the keywords before the migration already, we can also, or even with Google Search Console, we can then see did we lose, for example, rankings on certain keywords, and which page was ranking for that keyword. So did something change to that page? I would really dive into the data, not look to only overall, but really in which pages lost traffic, and then compare them with the old site. That usually already gives a lot of input for optimizations. And I got an email question from Sarah. Like, just to clarify, you say 3 areas of SEO: content, technical SEO, and backlinks. That's correct. Backlinks is a very sensitive area in SEO. It's an area where Google gives a lot of penalties because Google doesn't want that you buy links or generate links to manipulate the rankings. The way what Google wants is that your website is so good that other websites are starting to link automatically. Because of that, you get a higher ranking. In some practical, sometimes it doesn't work exactly that way because if people are not aware of your brand or your content, sometimes it needs to have like a little push. But I would stay away, for example, from exchanging links, buying links bulk or anything, any tricks. So if you want to do like these days, digital PR. So if you have a product and you know your target audience is on another website, then you can reach out to the website like, hey, can I tell something about how my product can benefit your readers? So it's more from a digital PR perspective than just getting a link. So that would be like the more safer way. So that's why we usually focus a lot on how can I build a better website? What can I offer on my website what competitors don't have? Go ahead. Okay. Can you suggest any SEO-friendly themes for migration? So if you use any team websites, for example, Team Forest or any of those, usually there's so many teams, so I cannot suggest like one off my head, but what I usually do is that you have these demo sites, and then if you click into the source code And if you see directly or if you see quite quickly the content of the page, it's usually good. But if you see a lot of code and you hardly see any content of the page, it's usually a signal that the code is not very clean. You can also run the demo site to any like page speed tests, for example, from Google, and see if it has a good score. Because if it's not, then it's usually a warning signal, and you can better look for another team. So I would definitely use do some research on the demo website before purchasing a team that you can use for the migrations.
Awesome. Last couple of minutes, does anyone else have any other questions, either related to what we've discussed today or any other aspects of SEO? Please go ahead, drop it in the chat, or feel free to unmute. Just going to give you guys a couple of seconds. All right, I guess there are no more questions, which is awesome. Thank you so much, Miranda, for being here and for taking us through all of these topics and making it very, very simple and using the 5 steps to explain the concept of website migration. So really appreciate it from our side, from Qureos, and from all of the apprentices who have joined today. Tina, did you have a question?
Yeah, Miranda, I just want to ask, like, in case if something goes wrong, what would you suggest for backup? I mean, any backup, like while doing migration, there might be, I mean, sometimes it goes unplanned. So what do you suggest?
Yeah. So what we usually do is that we build a website on a different domain, on a different server. And then when we push the website live, we switch the DNS of the domain to the other server. So every domain name is pointing to an IP address. So in the hosting part, you can say like this is the server where it currently points to. And then when you migrate or you put a website live, you change that address and you say, now I want to point to this server. So if you do that, then if the migration goes wrong, then you can basically just change your settings again and point again back to the old server. That's one thing. Another thing, if everything is on the same server, usually then I make a folder with the old website. I move the old files into that folder, and then basically switch my own website or the new website live. So if anything happens, then at least I can refer the process. So that's why it's very, very important to always make sure that there's a backup, or at least like a plan B if things don't work out, to be able to quickly switch back.
Great. I hope that helps, Tina. Again, thank you so much, Miranda. I think those are all the questions, so we'll wrap it up. I'll share the recording with each one of you guys. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a part of our webinar today. Athar, did you have a question?
Yes, Joanna, I have some question, and sorry I'm a bit late. So my question is regarding the site migration. Question is that for how long we have to keep the redirects from old website to new website?
Yeah, good question. So actually, there was, I think, a couple of months where Google said, or Gary Eels from Google said, that you need to keep the redirects for 1 year. So to make sure that Google really sees like all the signals and everything is updated. So I would just keep them for 1 year. After that, I would check which of the links still have backlinks to make sure that at least those are going to a working page, or like at least that those are redirected. Others could check like, do we still need them, or can we delete a bunch of them? Because if you have a lot of redirects, it can also slow down your server. So that's why usually keeping a large redirect file for a long time, usually it's not the most beneficial.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, that's it. No more questions. We're going to stop now. Thank you so much. Thank you to each one of you guys. Miranda, I will get in touch with you. We can definitely have a chat next week. Big thank you. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Hope this session has been very helpful and you've been able to learn a couple of new things. And I really look forward to seeing each one of you on a new webinar, a new cohort, and having Miranda back for another session very soon. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Hope you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks, Maina.